So okay, so you get the block of draft down, and you go. Does you look back until you get to the end, or do you get to the current book before you start rewriting and revising?
So I will go through the whole, like, I think it's easier to describe it as like I'm making a statue out of marble. First, I have to set up the marble, and that's me just putting everything on the page, right? And being like, okay, now it's time to get detailed with it and go through and chisel out the features and make sure everything's how I want to be. And even while I'm doing that, I'll have spur of the moment ideas that come to me. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's going in the book. So I'll throw it on the page, and then when I go through so many rounds of edits on these because I will be doing my dyslexia stuff with it, but I'll go through a bunch of rounds of edits, make sure this is perfect, make sure it's reading how I want it to, and yeah.
Your dyslexic stuff. What kind of stuff is that?
So when I throw it all on the page, you'll have jumbled words. Some sentences will be flipped. And so I get it to where, like, and sometimes I'll just leave the part that I wanted to put the sentence in, like leave the main subject out. And I'll be like, oh, I totally forgot to put that in there. And so it's really just being mindful of my own mistakes and my own shortcomings when it comes to just throwing it on the page the first time. But as long as you keep reading through it and working through it, you make progress.
But you're not doing that until you get the full story down at a full draft.
100%, yeah.
Keep using 100%. What's the word I'm looking for? Your restraint. I need to be able to do. I'm forever. I described this in a workshop I'm leading as like taking a shower and drying your legs before you wash your upper body. But you're going to have to dry them again. You're wasting time. Doesn't stop me. I'm well aware of that. I'm like, oh, but that part's already written. I don't have to imagine anything. Let me just prettify it a little bit. And then, of course, I'll realize something that's true about the plot that I have to change all of that again. So glad I prettied it. Do as I say, esteemed audience, not as I do. You'll be better. So how many drafts before somebody other than you takes a look at this thing?
I have to go through it at least 4 or 5 times, because on that fourth or fifth time, that's when I get wordsmithy with it. And that's when I'm like, oh, let's put that in there. Hey, this reads better this way. And so it's definitely multiple drafts, at least 4.
Gotcha. And then who's your first reader?
My first reader, probably my wife, and then I'll tell my dog the story, but sometimes I'll let my parents take a crack at it. They're great. They'll be like, oh, this is amazing, and I'm like, what is amazing? All of it. And so I'm like, I like having my wife go through it. She'll be like, she really knows like where I want to go with the story. I'm always blabbering to her about my books, the story. I'm like, oh, I just came up with this idea. Like when I actually incepted the idea for David Massie, it was probably like 1 a.m, 2020. And we're laying in bed and I'm like, David Massie. And then I went on a tangent about reality changing with a dark armored figure. And she's like, will you just go to sleep? But yeah, and so she's always the first one to read it.
And when she gives you constructive criticism, how do you take that in good grace without having that turn into some sort of fight or otherwise impact your marriage?
So the big thing was like I'm a little bit hard-headed and stubborn, and I had to learn how to take criticism, really. because like I'm super prideful about what I do, but I had to learn like, hey, constructive criticism is really good and it can help me get my books to where I want them to be. And so that was like every writer has to go through a uh, constructive criticism phase of like having to be like, oh, let me not get angry at the like them their objection. Let me hear it, internalize it, figure out a good solution how to utilize it.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes the problem is readers just don't appreciate our brilliance. Once in a while, that is true.
I get that way too, though. Trust me.
No, it's never true. Listen to your critics, esteemed audience. Revise, rewrite, of course. Once in a while, it is true, though. A little bit.
My biggest thing is, and my wife always will say this when I get criticism, I'm always like, they didn't read the whole book. And she's saying it before I even say it. I'm like, okay, maybe let me read it again. But yeah.
So how long does a draft take you to get done on average? And then how between the initial draft to the end process, what's the timeline?
Timeline, I want to say, so with this most recent one, the first David Massie probably took me around like 6 months. This one took me around 8 to 10 months because I want to take more time and really evaluate the storyline and make sure like it's a wild ride. Like I wanted this one to be like you get in and it's immediately a roller coaster with twists and turns. You're not expecting this to happen in this chapter, and you like I wanted to do ancient Greece right. I wanted to put a bunch of mythical stuff in it, and I wanted to do like I always like having like some funny aspects in my book, you know. And this one, I try to add some like Greek culture, how you know, like most of the city states of Greece all hated each other. You know, Athenians hated the Spartans, you know, and so because they're all up until I want to say Persia, right? That unified them, but up until that, they were just the divided states.
So that first draft of the 6 to 8 months, that first draft is what, maybe 2 months, 3 months? How much of that time does that take?
Oh, I totally missed the question.
I mean, there's no grade. You passed this class already. You're good.
I'm just talking here. I'm sorry. The first draft probably like I've had first drafts done in a week, but I would not be comfortable showing anybody my first draft. I think that is something I need to like roll up the sleeve. Like I'll get the first draft done. Like first David Massie, I had it done probably a week, and then months of redrafting, chiseling, and getting it ready. Same thing with Corrupted Light. I probably had Corrupted Light first draft done in about 2 weeks, but that was 7 months of re-editing. That was my first book too, so it was like a lot of elbow work, learning on the fly and all that stuff. And then but this I don't know if you can see, I try to it's my second Corrupted Light. That one took, I want to say the first draft to finish it was probably 3 months.
So that, I mean, 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks to get an initial draft.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? Are you not eating, not going to you're not showering?
I get a little obsessive with it. Yeah, it's I definitely shower. I definitely so like I'll do this thing where I will work so hard that I forget to eat, and then I'll be like, after I'm done working, I'm like, oh, why do I feel so weird? And my wife's like, you forgot to eat your lunch. And I'm like, oh no. So there's that, like, I'll just kind of like pour my all, like my whole like mind and soul into these. So